You did everything right. You saved your money. You watched the market. You waited for the right moment. And somehow buying a home still feels completely out of reach. Here's the part that nobody is talking about clearly enough. The United States housing market is currently recording its lowest number of home sales since 1995. Fewer homes are selling right now than at any point in the last 30 years. And at that exact same moment, home prices are sitting near all-time highs. Fewer buyers, higher prices, both happening at the same time. In any normal market, those two forces cancel each other out. That is how supply and demand works. You learned it in school. Every economist alive learned it too. And yet here we are. The market is frozen. The prices are at historic highs. The average first-time buyer is now 40 years old. And if you have tried to buy a home recently, you already feel that something is deeply and structurally broken. You just cannot quite name it. Today we are going to name it for you, every single domino in order, with the actual numbers. My name is Uncle Investor, and I am 45 years old. I break down exactly what is happening inside the housing market so you can make smarter financial moves with your eyes wide open. If you want real financial clarity that the real estate industry would genuinely prefer you never have, subscribe right now and hit that like button. Now let us get into it. The median existing home price in the United States right now is approximately $418,000. Back in 2019, just 7 years ago, that number was $272,000. That is a 46% jump. And we are not talking about Manhattan or Palo Alto. We are talking about the national median, the dead center of the entire country. Mortgage rates today are sitting around 6.5%. That sounds manageable on the surface until you remember that in January 2021, you could lock in a 30-year fixed mortgage at just 2.65%. That is not just a different interest rate. That is a completely different financial reality. Here is what that gap looks like in actual dollars. Take a $400,000 home, put 20% down. Your loan is $320,000. At 2.65%, your monthly payment was $1,293. At today's 6.5%, that exact same loan now costs $2,023 every month. That is $730 more every single month for 30 years. For the same house, same carpet, same school district, same yard the size of a generous parking space. And on top of that, the house itself costs $146,000 more than it did 6 years ago. So you are paying more for the loan and more for the house at the exact same time. This is not bad luck. This is the result of a very specific sequence of decisions and financial shocks that stacked on top of each other over 5 years. Once you understand the sequence, the current situation stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like an almost predictable outcome. Now let us go back to where this all started. The year is 2020. The Federal Reserve, in full emergency mode, slashes interest rates to nearly zero. They begin purchasing $120 billion in bonds and mortgage-backed securities every single month. They are injecting money into the financial system with the commitment of someone who started a bonfire and is now genuinely alarmed by how much lighter fluid they used. By January 2021, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate hit 2.65%, the lowest Freddie Mac had ever recorded since 1971. People who had been sitting on the fence about buying suddenly realized they could afford dramatically more house for the same monthly payment. So they bought and bought and bought again. But that was only half the fuel. The pandemic completely rewired what Americans needed from their home. Suddenly, your apartment was your office, your gym, your classroom, your restaurant, and your only source of human contact. A 700-square-foot city apartment that used to feel perfectly fine suddenly felt like a sensory deprivation chamber with a Wi-Fi password. Remote work jumped from under 6% to over 18% almost overnight. Millions of Americans started asking a very logical question. If I can work from anywhere in the country, why am I spending $2,800 a month to live somewhere I do not even enjoy? So they left. Manhattan lost 200,000 households. San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles each shed tens of thousands more. All of them poured into Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville, and Tampa. Cities with already limited inventory that suddenly faced a stampede of buyers carrying pre-approvals, pandemic savings, and an urgent need for a home office that was not also a closet. National home prices jumped 37% between March 2020 and March 2022. Not across a decade, across 2 years. Austin climbed 61%, Phoenix surged 59%, Boise, Idaho shot up 53%. At the peak, Nearly 6,000 homes in a single month sold for $100,000 or more above the asking price. For completely ordinary houses where ordinary people were going to do ordinary things, cook dinner, argue about who forgot to take out the trash. If you bought in 2020 or 2021, you likely made one of the best financial decisions of your entire life almost entirely by accident. That is not skill. That is timing. And for every person who was not in a position to buy during that window, what happened next made the situation dramatically worse. Now here is where the story takes a painful turn. By mid-2022, inflation was running at 9.1%, the highest level in 40 years. So the Federal Reserve did what central banks do when inflation runs hot. They raised rates aggressively, historically aggressively, 11 rate hikes across 16 months, from 0.25% all the way to 5.50%, the fastest tightening cycle in 4 decades, and mortgage rates followed in the worst possible direction. January 2022, 3.22%, October 2022, 7.08%, October 2023, 7.79%, the highest since the year 2000. Think about that for a second. 7.79%. On the very same houses that people were paying $100,000 over asking price for just 18 months earlier. At 7.79%, that $320,000 mortgage now costs $2,032 a month compared to $1,293 at the pandemic low. That is over $1,000 more every single month, over $363,000 more across the life of the loan for the exact same house. To qualify for the median-priced home at today's 6.5% rate, a household needs to earn around $106,000 a year. The median household income in America is $83,700. The average American family is roughly $22,000 per year, short of qualifying for the average home. And every single quarter-point rate increase pushed approximately 1.4 million additional buyers completely out of the market. Home sales dropped from 6.12 million in 2021 to just over 4 million in 2025. That is the slowest 3-year stretch the housing market has seen since the mid-1990s. We are selling fewer homes today in a country with 100 million more people than 1995 than we sold back in 1995. But here is the part that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. Prices did not fall. The median home price in 2024 hit $407,500, a record high that the market has essentially been hovering near ever since. Demand collapsed and supply collapsed at exactly the same time, and that created something the modern housing market had never quite experienced before, a complete and total freeze. And to understand why prices did not fall, you need to understand the one force that is quietly holding this entire market hostage. Right now, approximately 51% of all outstanding United States mortgages carry an interest rate below 4%. Around 20% carry a rate below 3%. If you bought in 2020 or 2021 and locked in 2.75%, you are sitting on a financial instrument that simply does not exist anywhere in the market anymore. The bank will not recreate it. No lender can offer it. It is gone, like a limited edition product that sold out permanently and never came back. So if you sell your house today and buy another one, you are not just moving homes, you are voluntarily giving up the cheapest money you will almost certainly ever have access to in your lifetime, and replacing it with money that costs more than twice as much. On a $400,000 mortgage, that trade costs you $730 more every single month, forever. That is $87,600 over just 1 decade in interest alone, simply for wanting to live somewhere different. Federal Reserve researchers calculated the average lock-in cost, the pure financial penalty of swapping your old low-rate mortgage for a new one, at over $65,000. $65,000 just to leave. So the rational homeowner stays put in the house that has gotten too small, in the nursery that quietly became a Zoom background, in the neighborhood where they stopped knowing their neighbors years ago, not because they want to stay, because a financial spreadsheet is physically trapping them there. The Atlanta Fed found that this lock-in effect reduces the probability that any homeowner lists their property by 21 to 23%. Researchers at the Federal Housing Finance Agency estimated it has suppressed 1.7 million home sales that would otherwise have happened naturally. Active inventory remains 17% below 2019 levels. Months of supply sits between 3.3 and 3.8. A balanced market needs 6 months of supply. The market is not broken because it is crashing. It is broken because it has completely stopped moving. Like a door that will not open and will not close, just stuck, vibrating slightly, going absolutely nowhere. Now let us talk about who is feeling this the hardest. Meet Rachel. She is 31 years old. She works in healthcare administration in a normal mid-sized American city. She earns $74,000 a year, which is above the national median income. No credit card debt. A 760 credit score. $31,000 saved after 3 full years of real sacrifice. Skipped vacations, no new car, one roommate for longer than she wanted. By any reasonable standard, Rachel is exactly the kind of person home ownership was designed for. Here's what the market hands her in return. The median home in her city is $385,000. With 10% down, her loan is $346,500. At 6.5%, her monthly principal and interest payment is $2,190. Add property taxes at $350, insurance at $150, a maintenance reserve at $320. Her total monthly housing cost lands at $3,010. Rachel takes home around $4,650 a month. Housing would consume 65% of that. She would have $1,640 remaining for food, transportation, health insurance, utilities, student loans, and the occasional reminder that she is a living human being with a social life. She cannot afford this house. Not because she made poor choices, because the income you actually need to comfortably buy the median home in her market is $110,000 and she earns $74,000. That gap is not a personal failure. It is structural. It is locked into the math before she ever opens a browser tab. And there are millions of Rachels out there right now. Financially responsible people being told by every cultural message around them that they should own a home by now, while being quietly shut out by numbers that never appear in those messages. Here is what that actually feels like day to day. It does not feel like a housing crisis. It feels like opening a real estate app for the 16th time this week and saving a listing you cannot afford just to have somewhere to direct the frustration. It feels like your rent jumping $150 in the spring and realizing your down payment timeline just got pushed back another 3 months. For savings you have been carefully building for 3 years. It feels like attending your best friend's housewarming, genuinely happy for them, while quietly doing the math on what their monthly payment must look like. It feels like doing everything right by virtually every financial measure and still being systematically locked out of the one thing your parents considered a basic milestone of adult life. And the numbers paint a clear picture of just how widespread this problem has become. First-time buyers now make up just 21% of all home purchases, a record low across 44 years of data. The historical average is 40%. The median age of a first-time buyer today is 40 years old. In the early 1990s, it was 28. Buying at 40 instead of 30 costs roughly $150,000 in lost lifetime equity. That is a full decade of appreciation you simply never captured. Baby boomers now represent 42% of all buyers. Half of older boomers are purchasing entirely in cash. They sold a home they bought for $200,000 back in 1998 that is now worth $700,000. They pocketed the equity and walked back into the market with zero mortgage pressure. Meanwhile, a 32-year-old is trying to win a bidding war, armed with a pre-approval letter and $31,000 in savings. The ripple effects go far beyond real estate. 84% of Generation Z aspiring homeowners say they are delaying at least one major life milestone because of housing costs. 29% are postponing having children. 18% are delaying marriage. 1 in 6 aspiring buyers and 22% of millennials specifically have abandoned the goal of homeownership entirely. Not paused it, abandoned it. The median first-time buyer being 40 years old is not just an interesting data point. It is the statistical fingerprint of a generation that has been squeezed so hard and for so long that the defining marker of middle-class stability has been pushed from early adulthood all the way into middle age. Now here is the part that rarely gets enough attention. This shortage did not begin in 2020. It was built slowly over 15 years of underbuilding that followed the 2008 financial crisis. The United States is currently short somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 million housing units. After the financial crisis, builders pulled back sharply throughout the entire 2010s. Housing starts averaged around 990,000 per year against a historical baseline of 1.5 million, and the homes that did get built leaned heavily toward the higher end of the market because that is where the profit margins were strongest. The starter home under 1,400 square feet, the traditional first step for first-time buyers, went from over 400,000 units built per year in the 1970s to just 65,000 in 2020. That is an 80% decline. The home that was supposed to be the first rung on the wealth building ladder for working Americans was essentially discontinued as a product. Then came the pandemic demand surge, then the rate spike, and now tariffs are adding more pressure on top. Steel is up 50%, aluminum is up 50%, Canadian lumber is up 45%. Together, those increases are estimated to add between $10,000 and $17,500 to the cost of building every new home. Builders are responding with incentives and rate buydowns as low as 4.5%. But the honest reality is this: the supply problem took a full decade to create. It will take at least a decade to meaningfully fix. There is no policy lever in existence that builds 4 million homes in 2 years. Now let us address the question that comes up in every one of these conversations. Is this 2008 all over again? No, not even remotely. And understanding why it is different matters enormously. In 2006 and 2007, subprime mortgages made up 18 to 21% of all loan originations. Liar loans, interest-only products, negative amortization mortgages. These were mainstream financial products being sold to everyday buyers. The entire banking system was placing bets on home prices rising forever, using borrowed money stacked against itself with absolutely no margin for error. Today, subprime lending represents roughly 3.6 to 4.2% of originations. The median credit score at loan origination is 758. That is 50 points higher than it was in 2006. And here is the single most important number in this conversation. In 2009, 26% of all mortgaged properties were underwater, meaning homeowners owed more than their homes were worth. That is the exact condition that triggers mass defaults, forced sales, and a true price collapse. American homeowners are collectively sitting on $35.8 trillion in home equity. Foreclosures in 2024 totaled 174,100. In 2008, that number was 2.3 million. The 2008 crisis happened because banks lent money to people who could not repay it, secured against home values that were largely invented. Today, the situation is almost the exact reverse. The lending is sound, the borrowers are qualified, the equity is real, and you still cannot afford to buy anything. Progress, technically. This is not a fragile market teetering on collapse. It is a frozen, structurally constrained, deeply expensive market grinding slowly sideways. A crash at least creates buying opportunities. A frozen market mostly just continues to absorb more of your income while waiting for time to do what policy cannot. So what actually fixes this, and when does relief arrive? The thing everyone is waiting for is a meaningful drop in mortgage rates. It would genuinely help. Most current forecasts project rates ending 2026 somewhere between 5.7 and 6.1%. That is better. But a Bankrate survey found that 37% of current homeowners say they need rates to fall below 5% before they would even consider listing their home for sale. That threshold is not where 2026 is headed. The lock-in effect does ease naturally over time. People have children, change careers, go through divorces, and retire, life events that force a move regardless of rate math. The share of mortgages carrying a rate below 4% has already fallen from a peak of 65% down to around 48% today. That gradual release is the most realistic path toward a more functional market. But gradual is the key word. This is a 5 to 10 year process. Now here is the twist that almost nobody is talking about. A dramatic rate drop might not solve affordability. It could actually make things temporarily worse. Think about it carefully. Millions of buyers are sitting on the sidelines right now waiting for relief. If rates drop to 5% quickly, that entire wave of pent-up demand floods back into the market at once. But supply does not recover overnight. The 3.5 million unit deficit took a decade to build up. So what happens when enormous demand crashes into completely insufficient supply? Prices spike. The same pattern that drove the 2020 to 2022 surge could partially repeat itself, but this time starting from an already elevated base. The cure, if it comes too fast, could temporarily make the disease worse before it makes it better. The most honest forecast available today is also the least exciting one. A slow, multi-year process where prices move roughly sideways while incomes gradually catch up. No dramatic crash, no sudden relief, just time and steady adjustment with a lot of hard, personal decisions sitting right in the middle of it. So here is what this all means for you personally. If you are in your late 20s or 30s right now, you are navigating the most dysfunctional housing market any generation has faced since World War II. Not the most dramatic. 2008 was more dramatic in the headlines. But this one is more insidious because it does not feel like a crisis. It feels like a permanent new normal that nobody officially declared. Your frustration is completely valid. The income required to comfortably buy the median home in America today is approximately $106,000. The median household income is $83,700. The system has a $22,000 gap baked into it before you even walk through a front door. You are not failing at adulthood. The math is simply broken. The decision to buy must be grounded in your real personal numbers, not the market's narrative, not your real estate agent's enthusiasm. If your total monthly housing costs land below 28 to 30% of your gross income, and you plan to stay in that home for at least 7 years, buying makes financial sense. If the math does not clear that bar, it does not clear it. Stretching to 45% of your monthly income because someone tells you now is always a great time to buy does not make it a great time. It makes you a future cautionary example. Renting while investing the difference is a completely legitimate long-term financial strategy. Almost no one with a financial stake in your decision will ever suggest it. Nobody earns a commission when you put money into an index fund. But in a high-rate, high-price environment, this approach can absolutely match or even outperform buying an overpriced house. This is not a backup plan. This is a real and viable strategy. If you are actively looking to buy right now, take a serious look at new construction. Builder rate buy downs to 4.5 to 5% are real, available, and worth pursuing. The median new home price is now essentially at parity with existing homes, something that almost never happens in a normal market. Just be sure the incentives are not quietly hiding an inflated base price. Run every number before you put pen to paper. The housing market you are facing today is the direct result of 30 months of the cheapest money in American history, followed immediately by the fastest rate hike cycle in 40 years, stacked on top of a decade of underbuilding that left the country 4 million homes short. There is no single product, no policy, no executive order, and no rate cut that resolves a structural imbalance this deep in a single year. You are not irrational for looking at listings and thinking none of this adds up. It genuinely does not. And understanding exactly why it does not add up is the first real step toward making a decision that actually works for your life. Instead of simply joining the crowd of people buying at any price because everyone around them insists it is always the right move. Now you have the full picture. And the full picture is what gives you the power to make the right call. If this video helped you see the housing market more clearly, do one thing right now. Share it with a friend or a family member who is trying to decide whether to buy or keep waiting. They need to see these numbers just as much as you did. And if you want to keep making sharper financial decisions, go watch our previous video right now. It is called 17 More Things That Are No Longer Worth Your Money. It will change the way you look at where your money is going every single month. Uncle Investor is out. Stay smart out there.